Okay, welcome back. On page 283, I was talking about how if you're going to be applying for a security position, expect your life to be scrutinized. I had somebody come to me and say, look, I was dumb as a kid and I have a felony conviction. I spent some time in prison, but I really want to be a security analyst. Is that really going to hurt me? And I went, yeah, yeah, that's going to hurt. I'm sorry. Felony conviction, time in jail. Yeah. And by the way, if that was the case, for God's sake, don't try to hide that, because that's just dumb. You need to tell them up front. Look, I was stupid. I was 21 years old. I was just a stupid kid and I did something dumb. And yeah, I spent 6 months in jail, that kind of thing. Okay, so here's the things are you who you say you are? Your identity has to be assumed. Your education, are they going to check? Probably. You say you got a bachelor's degree? I'm going to check. Certifications, you say you've got Security Plus? I'm going to check. Previous employment, am I just going to take your word for it? I'm going to check. References, now references are rough because the references you put down are always going to be glowing references, right? So I might want to contact your previous employer that you did not refer to. I did one of those. Called this grumpy, at this point retired, general on the phone and said, hey, I'm getting ready to hire this guy. What do you think? And he says, that bastard? No way in hell. And I went, oh, okay, thank you. Social media, now the public part of social media, I have heard of people talk about how, during interview process, you had to disclose your password to your Facebook account. And I was going, and a lot of people were going, whoa, 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 wait a minute. That's kind of So, by the way, is it illegal for them to ask? No. You can say no. Okay. So any workman's compensation claims, any driving records, drug history, credit, court history. You remember the Fair Credit Reporting Act? I can't do the credit part check without your consent. And then again, does a criminal record preclude employment? No, but it's going to hurt. So employee contracts. Basically, you have to agree to the policies. I'm going to give you a bunch of policies, and you have to agree to them. That's your consent. Okay. You may get a non-disclosure agreement, like you know the keys to the kingdom now, right? You got to make sure that you're not spilling the beans, and there could even be a non-compete, but I don't see that much in security. But to make sure that you're understanding that you agree to the policies, they're basically saying something like, the offer is contingent upon receipt of the agreement, where you sign something saying, I agree to all this stuff. Okay, cool. So new hire orientation, perhaps it's a video, right? Perhaps with a test where you have to have a passing score, and if you miss it, you have to take the video over again. And then, it ought to include the expected levels of authorized access that you're going to get. You're going to get password on this, so therefore you need this. On the job training, obviously, there's going to be a huge component to that, because nobody comes out of college with everything you need to be able to be a good security analyst. Periodic reinforcement for training for everybody, and then specific training for new people or new equipment. I mean, if I got a brand new router, then my technician down here is going to send him off to school and learn how to, go to Cisco and learn how to configure the router. And then evaluations, you're probably going to have some sort of performance appraisals, right, for any other job, right? And managers tend to look at those things that are measured. In other words, if it's a key performance indicator, a KPI, then that's what they kind of focus on. They don't really necessarily focus on, hey, but I stopped an intruder last year, that kind of stuff. So yeah, maybe if they had some sort of you might have, the manager might have as a key performance indicator, like when you do periodic, I do annual testing, okay? Annual testing to make sure I understand security. Yes, I know it's crazy because I teach these courses, but as an employee of the university, I still have to take this. And maybe their KPIs would include the scores of their employees. Just an idea. And then if there's a problem, you probably have to start with a warning like, hey, wait a minute now. Okay, that kind of stuff. Okay, now the next one is really, really tough, and that's terminating an employee, page 286. By the way, I've been a manager for 20-something years, and, firing an employee is not fun. I mean, I go home in a grumpy mood, and I do not sleep late. Sleep well. Okay, here is the issue. Everyone in the organization who deals with this has to be available, and they have to know what needs to happen. For example, I'm gonna fire Bob, and let's just say it's a hostile thing. He doesn't know, right? And we frog march him out of the building, and then I go to the IT people and say, you need to deactivate his account immediately. And they go, oh, well, Fred's not here. I'll do that in the morning. No, it has to be done now. Okay, that kind of thing. So none of this, oh, well, that person's not here today. Not happening. Okay. So you basically have to have a checklist of things to make sure that everything is going well. So even in a friendly termination, maybe I'm just retired, okay? I still had to have a checklist of all the stuff. Do I have a security token? Do I have an access badge? Do I have a password? So who maintains the list of what passwords and accounts you have? Hopefully it's the manager, okay? The manager says, Bob is a security manager for this database and this database. So therefore he has an account here, an account here that has administrative rights. Somebody has to make a list, because when Bob leaves, then I have to go and change those passwords, and which means or disable those accounts, one of the two, okay? I have to return any removable media, particularly if it's like a security token or USB flash drives, those kinds of things. Key cards, keys. I'm probably going to rekey anyway. I'm not going to have the same, code to get into the server room. If a senior person leaves, I'm probably going to switch that out. And by the way, don't let the employees perform the checklist. You're gonna have the manager, the one who's doing the termination, is going to have to go through and say, okay, I understand you have accounts on 3 systems. Is that correct? And the guy says, well, no, it's actually 4. And you go, that kind of stuff. And you go through it all. Show me give me your badge, and, all the rest of that stuff. And you could do an exit interview. And exit interviews are great because that's practically the only way to find out if you get an honest opinion of what's going on. So, and you might have to remind them of a non-compete or a non-disclosure agreement at that time. Now, the hostile ones, oh God, those are painful. Let me just tell you the story. We had a contract employee who, supervisor who was responsible for reporting the time of the subordinates, and they were going to be gone on Friday. So they prepared the report in advance and, tricked the machine into changing the date, and had an email being sent at a time, basically faking the hours. They caught wind of it and fired the employee, and they had it was very messy. They showed up with a hand truck full of empty cardboard boxes, rolled into the cube, said, you need to pack up all your stuff, and they marched her out the building. It was bad. And ever since then, man, when somebody heard the squeaky wheels of a hand truck, and particularly if it was empty cardboard boxes, everybody even would duck for cover. I mean, it was bad, really bad. So hostile ones, you probably should have no advance notice, right? You don't tell them, hey, you're going to get fired tomorrow at 3:00. And typically what we probably do it like on a weekend when they don't, a Friday, but you got to make sure everybody's involved. You would probably even say, to the IT folks, the ones who maintain the accounts, at 3:00, their access goes down, and it's perfectly okay if they're still working, because I don't care, right? So I need to have all their access revoked immediately before we show up at their desk to say you're being fired, okay? So yes, no advance warning, and that does seem harsh. Escorted out by security, you get somebody supervising you, picking up your personal item, your potted plant, and picture of your spouse, on that kind of stuff, and they're making sure you're not running off with the calculator or the stapler or that kind of stuff, and they march you out of the building. So take nothing that's business related. Get your personal property out and return any government, property. Hey, let's say you had a laptop, but you left it at home. And we say, look, we expect you to return that laptop. That's a company asset that we want it back. Could you threaten them to say, we're going to withhold your pay until you return the laptop? You could threaten them, but could you actually? Could you withhold their pay? Yeah, probably not. And so deactivating the machine remotely and making sure its account's gone in Active Directory and all not attached to the domain. There's an awful lot of things that has to happen if they don't return the material. Okay. Now, a friendly one, well, that's easy. I'm getting ready to retire. I know in advance. Maybe they've even hired a replacement, and I'm sitting there talking to this person, stepping them through. That's beautiful. That's when you go to the conference room and have cake. The whole thing is perfect. Obviously, you're going to know well in advance. And yeah, they're going to collect their belongings, but that's about it. Now, the absolute worst scenario is you have a security professional, a security administrator with keys to the kingdom, and you're firing them for conduct. Ouch. This person has the keys to the kingdom and could do immeasurable harm. Wow. Okay. So hostile termination of a system administrator. Ouch, ouch, ouch. And here's the problem if you're a system administrator, now, their boss may not even be aware that they're the ones who have the password for the Git repository or the passwords for this particular piece of equipment. Because that just wasn't on the checklist, right? Then a friendly, you go through and say, oh yeah, by the way, I just now remembered that that firewall over there, I think I'm the one with the password. So let me write that down for you. That kind of stuff. But a hostile admin, oh my God, you're probably going to have trouble. What most people would do is immediately check the logs afterwards to see if there was something going on, because you're probably going to miss something. Okay. Anyway, that is nasty, nasty, nasty stuff. Okay, personnel control, page 287. So privacy, and we're really talking, privacy and conduct. So you could have some internal control strategy to make sure people are not cheating. And a two-person control basically means I do something, you review it, you do something, I review it. So you can't get away with practically anything. Everything has to be checked by a peer, okay? And then separation of duties. This is where the person who audits the warehouse ought not be ordering stuff for the warehouse. It really just can't be the same person. The person who orders it can't be the person who's receiving it in the warehouse, because that just invites problems. I ordered 12 and 12 of them come in, but I just say that there's 10 and take 2 of them home. I got to make sure that everything is legit. Okay, so dual controls. Now that's not exactly this, because dual controls could be something simple as I review each other's work. But this is, definitely takes 2 to tango. So how about a bank employee getting ready to do a cashier's check, and they go, just a minute. And they take the cashier's check and they go talk to another person and say, do you see anything weird here? And they go, no, it looks good. I'd recommend you go ahead and do it. And they go, okay. And they go back to the window and say, okay, pardon me for, checking here, but I'm ready to now cash your cashier's check. Okay, see how that works? Hey, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark.